The start of this next conversation is going to blow your freaking mind. Gentlemen, chat, this is where we get into the conversation of what the is going on at Sony and PlayStation Studios. So let me paint this, or let me build this shit sandwich that is PlayStation right now. Okay? You have Concord, $400 million. And I'm not going to stop talking about that because that happened. And it's never going away. And that's one of the biggest disasters in gaming as we know it. I've been gaming for 45 plus years, folks. And that's the biggest F up I've ever seen. Sony knows it. You know it. PlayStation owners know it. It's just unbelievable. Now, when you tack on to what is going on at Sony, that's the top. That should be the tip of the spear. But that's not the only thing that's going on at Sony. You have a game like Fair Games that ultimately is going to be canceled, right? You have Marathon coming out and getting less buzz than other games that are currently already being played by gamers, right? It's not free to play. It's going to cost, according to Sony, a premium price. We don't know what that price is because Sony isn't talking. But on top of that, on top of Bungie being a complete disaster in leadership, they just got called out publicly by an artist who is claiming that all of the artwork in the level building of the game was based on his work and he wasn't paid a dime. Holy shit, are you kidding me? But wait, this shit sandwich gets worse. So get ready for your taste buds, folks. The Helldivers 2 is a raging success for Sony. Not on their console, on PC. Yes, console players played it. I'm one of them. I bought it, and I also bought DLC, like stuff for it. I spent microtransactions on the game. I bought a cape. I bought a gun. I spent some money. I thought Helldivers was great. I just don't like the controller. I'd rather play with an Xbox controller. I was hoping that game, and it makes sense. Like, why wouldn't you put that game on Xbox? Xbox gamers would lap that up because it's a great freaking game. But guess what, ladies and gentlemen? Arrowhead, the makers of it, folks, they are not doing a sequel to Helldivers 3. And you ask, well, why? Well, because they are leaving to work to do their own thing. Okay, so I'm going to pull the tweet from Okami13. Basically says Helldivers 2 developer Arrowhead Studios will be fully self-publishing their next game. And this is what they had to say, folks. This is how you know, even though they're saying it publicly, but behind the scenes, it didn't go well with Sony leadership. Check this out, folks. It says this, and I quote, "The next game is 100% funded by ourselves. So we'll call 100% of those shots. PlayStation are great. There would be no Helldivers if it wasn't for them, but we're open to working with them again in the future." And that comes the way of Forbes.com. Now, I'm sorry to say, ladies and gentlemen, when you say PlayStation is great, that's PR horseshit. Okay? I can guarantee you that Arrowhead wanted to put Helldivers on Xbox, and like Sony, who doesn't understand business, who is just so stuck in the past, said, block hand, nope, that ain't going over there. We're keeping that as an exclusive. Exclusives matter. Console sales matter. Okay. Yeah, good for you. And I mean, think about that for a second, folks. Arrowhead is not working with PlayStation. There's no Helldivers 3. Their biggest gas game success. Concord failure, canceled. Fair Games looks like it's going to get canceled. Marathon limping out the gate, probably going to get delayed, right? And on top of all of that, Gorkenstein, there is no roadmap for PlayStation Studios. As a matter of fact, last time I checked, today was the 16th of May. The June showcase is happening in about 16 days. Do you think that Sony is just going to magically drop a showcase with no games? They don't have anything to show. They literally just had their CFO for their fiscal financials Q3 go on and say that they need to be more fiscally responsible for their first party studios, basically calling out all of their failures. And you know what? You sent me something and I want to bring it up. And you know what? If you have it in front of you, Korkenstein, because this is your baby, so I want to hand it off to you. Could you read off all of the failures and cancellation that we've had for PlayStation? Do you have that list in front of you?
Yeah, I got it right here.
Okay, so before I hand the mic over to you folks, there's one last cherry on top of the shit sandwich. So get ready, folks. Taste buds are going to be ruined forever. They announced that Team LFG is making a game codenamed Gummy Bears. That is their answer to their gas game problems. And it's formed up by some Bungie people. Okay, good luck with that. I think they're in trouble. Let's break down the list for the chat so they can understand how bad it is at Sony Game Studios right now, PlayStation Studios.
Yeah, definitely. I want to thank Lucas Tabs for this. I saw it on the Xbox Era Discord and they broke it down. Arrowhead Game Studios Helldivers 2 was released February 2024. So, all right, good. Starting off strong. Ben Studios unannounced gas game canceled 2025. All right, kind of going the wrong way now. Blue Point Games God of War gas game canceled 2025, still declining. Bungie Marathon 2025 ? All right, still not helping. Bungie Payback canceled 2024, still going downhill. Firespite Twisted Metal game gas canceled 2024. It's not looking good. Firewalk Concord released and canceled in 2024. Guerrilla Games Horizon Online title to be determined. So that's just kind of up in the air. Haven Studio Fair Games to be determined. Now that's in that might be on the chopping block. Insomniac game Spider-Man The Great Web canceled. The date was unknown, but still another canceled game. London Studios AAA new IP fantasy multiplayer title canceled because the studio was shuttered 2024. And Naughty Dog The Last of Us Factions Online canceled in 2025. So that's not good. That's a horrible list when you really look at it. And I'm very surprised. This is coming from users. No media has brought this attention so far that I've seen. No one's been like, WTF, you want to use LFG, Sony. What about WTF, with your lineup here?
I mean, Cork. So I think ultimately what is going on in PlayStation Studios really rings clear that there is a real disingenuous thing going on. See, when we talk about social media and something disingenuous happens, are any of us actually surprised, Cork? No. We're like, yeah, it's social media. It's disgusting. But when you have mainstream media writing articles about Xbox is dying, Xbox third party is going to fail, no more consoles. This is from journalists. Now, again, we don't do the names thing because we're not looking to, we're not about that smoke. But, there are consistent articles about Game Pass only being good for one reason. No, there's no reason for consoles. Third party, bad. Microsoft failed. And you just read a list of canceled games that basically are every gas game that they announced except for Helldivers. How is this not ringing the alarm with games media? Because they go right back to, Well, they sold 77 million consoles. Good for them. But what about the games? Oh, that's right. Because Xbox is feeding the masses on PlayStation because right now, 5 and 6 of the top 10 selling games are what? Oh, that's right. They're Xbox owned first party games. As a matter of fact, you have Horizon 5 outselling Astrobot. That's not good.
Like I said, WTF? What's going on here, PlayStation? You are an absolute mess. And rightfully so. They doubled down, and I know there was the article. Like I said, I'll give credit. I was gonna take. I'll be like, I posted that article, but no, it was Will Broke Boy. Like I said, we have a thing where we always steal each other's comments or ideas. But no, yeah, he posted it. I made that tweet. I tagged you in it. Boom. This is one of the first things I ever said on your channel is that Sony needs to get their stuff together. And if they don't pivot to multi-platform sooner than later, it's just going to get worse for them. We are seeing the just going to get worse for them part. This was what, a year ago now? Over a year ago now. The writing was on the wall. You have to increase. MAUs have always been the metric, but we got this silly little console war going on, and the media decided they're gonna, perpetuate that war with console sales. And console sales were, I'm not gonna say they never mattered, but they weren't the metric that really mattered. That's always been like, this is why Xbox has been dead 9-10 times so far, according to people. But they continue now. I mean, they're in a better place than ever, and they've always sustained. They've always grown because they had a heavy emphasis on live service, even before ABK. They were always a live service and subscription based, and they got people into their ecosystem through multiplayer games, whether it was third party or not. They were able to get people in to their ecosystem and stay there and spend with MTXs or microtransactions. That's always been the more important metric, and especially with Sony when they used these console sales, they use sell in units. That was their metric, sell in.
Yes.
For people that know what that means, that's not actually sold to consumers. That's sold to retailers. So that's not even stuff that they actually have in the consumer's hands, but people were treating it as such. They treated it, shipped versus sold. And that's not a great metric. This is why Xbox stopped using these console sale metrics and releasing that information, because it really didn't matter like the way people thought it did. You could get somebody to spend, $700, $800 on your system to get them into the ecosystem. But then if they're not sustaining that by buying games, by spending time playing multiplayer, by buying microtransactions, by doing subscription services, none of that matters. You just got them for $800. But now look at Xbox when they put their game on PlayStation. Anybody buying microtransactions there, that's money that's coming back. You're spending in the Xbox ecosystem. Gears of War, when that comes out, the Reloaded, anything you buy in that game, even the game itself, is going back to Xbox. You are in the Xbox ecosystem now. That makes a ton more money than getting that person to buy that one $800 console and rarely spending it. Like Boom said, 2 or 3 games. That's not a lot. Especially, when it's a Call of Duty world and Roblox world and Fortnite world and Madden,
Black Hole Games, brother.
Yeah.
That's the name of what those are. The Fortnites, the Apex Legends, they're considered black hole games because what happens is a gamer buys the console, falls in love with this game, and that's all that they play. That's it.
Yep. Yeah. And that just doesn't really matter as much anymore. That matters, but like it doesn't matter in the way if they're not spending in your ecosystem on that. So I just don't know what PlayStation is doing. I think Jim Ryan had a very good plan, live service. That's great, but I don't think they had the catalog of recent IPs that were making them a ton of money. That's why you're seeing a Last of Us 2 or a Last of Us MP, God of War multiplayer. And don't get me wrong, I would have liked this, but it doesn't make sense from a gameplay loop perspective. The Spider-Man games, it gets tedious after a while. Could you imagine having to do the gameplay loop of Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man 1 over and over and over and over and over. It, like, I get TD. I've beaten both of them, and I liked them. But the gameplay loop does get very tedious after a while, and eventually you're just like, I just want to, finish the story. It's not a great gameplay loop for multiplayer, but they're trying to use these IPs that they've built up and gotten so many sales from for exclusives. And it just doesn't translate well. Like God of War, like what you're just gonna have Kratos yelling "boy" for, it's all you're gonna hear is, a 32 multiplayer boy, 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 boy. And, like, come on, that gets old after a while. The gameplay loop isn't there for God of War. It's a fun game, single player game, no doubt, but there isn't a great healthy gameplay loop when it's a single player oriented title. I just can't see it. But you know what? And this is where I think Jim Ryan went wrong, and they doubled down on these major IPs. They have a ton of amazing multiplayer games they could have used, like Twisted Metal. That's just a bone. That's a great game.
They would have got me for sure.
Is absolutely perfect. That's absolutely perfect for live service and multiplayer. And they threw that away. SOCOM, they have that. Why not use it? There's tons of games that Sony has in their catalog, but they've spent so much time, doubling on exclusive first person Hollywood blockbuster IPs. And I know he posted that article, but Sony never followed through with it. They just continue to be doubling down on these IPs that only, were one and dones, and that's it. And this is why Sony's in the position that they are. They need to branch out. They need to get these live service games going, but they've started it way too late. So now they're going to be in a dry period. I would assume, they're banking on Marathon. They were banking on Fairlight Games. They're banking on Project Gummy Bears. I mean, granted, we don't really know much about it. I think it's a bad.
It's probably
name.
Just a code name, but
yeah, it's a bad code name.
Yeah,
for sure. But we don't know what their plan is. So I hope Sony figures it out, because it sucks for their consumers. I just wish more people kind of called this out to really push them. They should have been calling them out for years. But you guys played the console war game, and now you're stuck with a console and no games.
Yeah, you know what? Again, it's odd. It's like a 180. Crispy, I want to bring you into the conversation, but I want to lead this conversation for you with some numbers, because we all can have opinions, right? But numbers, well, you really can't argue the numbers. So, of course, I want to give credit where credit is due, like I always do. And this is another post from Ecstasies. It was on May 14th, 2 days ago. Now, obviously, it was announced during Sony's fiscal breakdown for their Q3 that they have 77 million consoles shipped. That's a lot of consoles, right? I don't specifically know if it's on par, a bit under, or a bit above where the PlayStation 4 Pro and PS4 was. I don't have those numbers in front of me, but I'm sure that it's close. So if they've sold 77 million, I think it's safe to assume, again, this is just being fair-minded, that Xbox has about 32 million consoles, Series X and S consoles in the wild, right? Half. Probably a little bit less than half to Sony's 77 million shipped. Okay, that's not surprising. That's how it was with the Xbox One generation. It was, Sony had double, and they sold their 30, 40 million consoles. Fine, whatever. But this is where the rubber hits the road as to who is making more money. And ultimately, I don't give a shit, because they're not filling my coffers. But if we're talking about Xbox dead versus PlayStation alive, well, this could just shut these knuckleheads up. So this is what Ecstasies tweeted. Based on the latest reports, Xbox generates more revenue than PlayStation from software, content, and services. And here's the breakdown. PlayStation, through software, content, services, and console sales, made $5.23 billion with AB. Interestingly enough, the dead Xbox, the zombified Xbox, I think the Xbox has died more than Jason Voorhees, and I know that Fuzzy would laugh at that one, right?
Oh, I do too.
Okay, so check this out. So again, let's be clear with the numbers. PlayStation, double the amount of Xbox consoles, right? Because console sales matter. At least that's what they told us. 5.23 billion. In the same time frame, well, look at that. Xbox in the US, $5.39 billion. So is it more by a lot? No, but it's more nonetheless. And that is all you need to know about whether or not Phil Spencer was right. Now, granted, OGs like us still don't like the idea of Sony getting Xbox games. We're always going to be that way. But the truth of the matter is who is making more money? Now, again, this is not me capping for the $3.5 trillion company because they don't give me shit, and that's fine. But if we're talking numbers about one company dead and the other company winning, we just broke down exactly why Sony is a complete shit show. Let's get your thoughts.
Well, I mean, here's the worst part of this is that Sony, they copy Xbox in so many aspects, but they actually didn't learn from what Xbox did. Remember, Xbox was all about multiplayer for a period of time. And that's all they had. And what did everybody do? They say, okay, like, can we have some single player games, please? Come on. You know what I mean? Like, and then all of a sudden, these past couple of years, more and more single player games come out. Now, I am going to attribute that to the fact that they can see that the MAU can be a part of multiple things. And the one underlying part has been Game Pass. And, just because somebody has Game Pass doesn't necessarily mean that they're not going to spend money on the back end on something, microtransaction or a DLC or something like that. You get the game in the service. That doesn't necessarily, we got to give Xbox a little credit. A lot of these updates and everything else are free, which is nice. Pro consumer. Okay. Even though I gave them, a couple weeks ago, gave them a lot of crap about, raising the price of the consoles. I think they just see an opportunity, which I don't like, but also business hat on. I say, okay, I understand. The problem is that Sony's talking out of both sides of their mouth right now. And I've called Xbox out on this years ago. You want MAUs, but you don't want to develop games on other consoles that would support games that are games as a service games like the ones you canceled. For example, the most egregious one, because there's nothing like it out right now, at least, that hits the tea leaves, is Twisted Metal. Okay, like Twisted Metal could be, and especially because it was a successful series, people would be interested in that. And
there's also a TV show which was really
well.
good.
That's what I'm saying. The series TV show. That's what I'm saying is that they had a successful TV series. That's what I should have said. And really, there was nothing there. And like you can go back to Twisted Metal Black. we like old games, but we also, you know, like as old as that, like you could just remake that and then throw some microtransactions and some multiplayer in there. And I'm sure, I mean, you know, for the newer people, it would be an awesome experience. And that's where I say, like, I think they, you know, they're trying to make these gas games like this new hotness. And really, they're like, most of them seem to be copying games that have already been out and already have taken the zeitgeist in some way. And you know, now they've canceled everything. And it's like, you know, Spider-Man, for example, like that, like, okay, I could play multiplayer with somebody. That would be actually cool. You know what I mean? Because there's so many different Spider-Mans in the Spider-Verse. You know what I'm saying? So you could, you know, play as one or the other, have different, you know, move sets, like really like combine into something, even if it's just 2-player instead of, you know, just single player. That would be amazing. But, you know, I think they had such a fall with Concord that they don't know what to do anymore. And, you know, to see this, you know, the Jade Raymond thing and all these other things that have transpired, like how Marathon is coming out. And I'll tell you right now, Marathon might be saved because it's Bungie and Xbox gamers are probably going to purchase it. Okay. And it's going on Xbox. And the one thing I want to say is that, you know, for them to keep canceling, or at least it's looking like they're going to, Fair Games is not going to be anything unless they're planning on releasing it on Xbox and PC, is that they have a conundrum because now they're seeing all these old games that Xbox is dropping on PlayStation that are successful. And, you know, like I said, I think Gears of War Reloaded is absolutely going to just obliterate sales, like compared to any other Xbox game that's went on PlayStation, because there are people that have never played a Gears of War game. So what they're doing is taking those older IP and they're saying, okay, here you go. And like, yes, you're getting, you know, you're getting Indiana Jones, you're getting some things, but it seems like those older IP are hitting good on there. And that's where I say, okay, you've developed a lot of your older IP, like a Days Gone, Spider-Man, stuff like that, to go to PC. I'm sure it's not as hard as people think to go to Xbox from there. And this is where I say, I understand that people think that, you know, Sony's just completely old school, but it seems like they're talking like they're going to adapt and they're preparing you for it, because if they're old school enough, but not too new school, they don't know how to make a gas game, but they can still take their old IP and release it on another console, even Nintendo as well, when the Switch 2 comes out. You understand what I'm saying? So they could still be old school in their own way. Like, okay, we just develop for these platforms and put it on PC first, and then PC can extend into other parts, you know, like Xbox, which it's pretty simple and from what I've seen for them to do that. And then you say, okay, like we can get that revenue there. You know, like they probably see, you know, what Forza is selling, even though it's older, you know, or the probably the pre-orders on Gears of War Reloaded, what they're seeing, because, you know, they you know, they can see those numbers because they're there in front of them. And they can go and say, you know what, if we release Spider-Man on Xbox, how much would it sell? And we've already developed it. Like, yes, it would be a little porting thing. I mean, how much would that cost compared to losing $400 million on Concord? Pennies, probably.
Yeah.
And it's one of those things, like, you got to look at it in a perspective to say they are changing leadership so much that Sony themselves is not happy with the PlayStation division. And they are putting people in there that are probably were, you know, a part of the Sony enterprise in itself. And they're putting them into the PlayStation enterprise as well. And they're involving them because at the end of the day, they are a publicly traded company and they want to make money. And they also want their shareholders to invest in them. And they need to figure that out, because right now, all I see is negative news. and not to say that, I mean, I truly believe, I know the rumors are out there. If they raise that price, we're going to see people have meltdowns. I'm just saying, because this continues the negative news, and Court, you went down the list. The negative news is not good, but to kill everything that is, a multiplayer game, like they're doing, gas game, whatever you want to call it, is horrible. And we've called Xbox, like Xbox was just like all about multiplayer. And it's like, okay, like we do like single player games, Xbox, hello. And then like all of a sudden now we're getting like, how many single player games do we get this year? Tons, right? But they have that back end that, hey, it's in Game Pass. Here you go. You know what I mean? So then they're still getting their revenue in one way or another. So you look at that and you say, okay, like they can drop single player games now because it just keeps people continuing to subscribe to the service.
Yeah.
What does Sony have in the same aspect? I mean, we barely see anything day and date over there. I mean, what, Stray and what, a couple other games, like, and they're
first party stuff though, dude. And that's
they take it out usually. Like they eventually
do.
take it out, and that makes me not say, oh, I want to play, because like if I'm going to pay the $18, like I would like some kind of incentive. And if you're going to take some of your games out that I've never played or want to play, why would I subscribe? Like it's a constant battle in there right now. And you could almost see it, like just with, Jade, whatever, she left or she got fired. And then, like the way Bungie's acting and all these other things and how they're like, they're melting, developers and studios they bought into their whole entire, like, like they're trying to make one thing. And it's like, but how many people are going to be like, nah, I'm not down for this. I'm going to leave. And then you lose good people that have great ideas. Well, you have Xbox sitting here saying, make what you want. If it's successful, we'll continue to work with you, especially if it's a second party. Or make what you want. We believe in you. We've seen what you're developing. It's something different. That's what we need in our service. This is the conundrum that Sony's in. They don't have that service that really highlights these games that, they might sell 10, 15 million, but that doesn't mean that's how much of your player base when it comes to your console. That's why I think they're going to branch out, and you're going to see more and more go day and date into PC, but also you're going to see some of these older games come to Xbox or Nintendo or both. So don't be surprised when it happens, because when it does, I am going to enjoy the meltdowns. Okay. Because I have sat here and I've stood, I want Gears to live. Gears of War Reloaded. Hey, you got the multiplayer. Awesome. I get to stomp some stands. Okay. That's the point. Like there's other elements involved. And when you take an older game, like imagine Last of Us coming to Xbox. For all those people that never got a PlayStation, I would play it. Why not? It's you'd sell 1 million. What's the port cost? Like look through that. Like they have money people in there that can do the math. And I'm telling you, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. I'd say in the next 3 years, it's going to happen. And then the meltdowns are going to be absolutely glorious on X, and it's just going to be hilarious. But that's really all I could say.
Well, I am going to say this, folks. If you did not know, besides being a big Chiefs fan, he's a receipt keeper. And he has receipts for years and days and months. So if you did say something egregious, get ready for him to drop the bomb on you, Crispy bomb. So there you go. But, Fuzzy Belvedere, I want to bring you in. And, of course, what is going on with PlayStation Studios. Well, here's some more interesting stats. Because I'm a stat guy. Like, we can all have our opinions. You could like one box or I like another one, or this platform is for me and that one's not. That's great. But here's some interesting stats. Now, this comes the way of an amazing community member on Twitter, Snap Blast Play. Basically, at Snap Blast Play, he puts out usual Xbox, pro Xbox commentary. But this one is very interesting. So he goes on to show a list of Xbox and PlayStation multiplayer games. So quickly, because it's such a small list, PlayStation had Concord and Marathon, first party. Fair Games, we don't know, and that's another one on the list. We don't know what's happening with that. If you want to, again, if you're counting straws because you have no straws, you have nothing else to count, and PlayStation doesn't really have a lot to count when it comes to multiplayer, you can throw in MLB The Show if you want. Sure, why not? Right? But then you go over to Xbox, and this list is as long as my arm. You got Call of Duty, Minecraft, Forza, Diablo, Sea of Thieves, Halo, Grounded, Overwatch, WoW, Gears, and Fallout. And there are actually some stuff missing, like Elder Scrolls Online, right? That's also a part of the that he forgot to add to it. And you know what's even more interesting? Most of these games are available on PlayStation. Call of Duty is, Minecraft is, Forza, Diablo, Grounded, Sea of Thieves, Overwatch, Gears eventually, Fallout, 76 is available, and obviously, like I said, Elder Scrolls. And this failure of leadership, failure of direction, failure of just keeping all of your eggs in one basket for Sony is promptly on display right now. And again, when you hearken back to what the CFO said, he didn't say that they 100% corrected the problem. He literally said, we're halfway there, and I think we're making strides. Halfway there? Are you kidding me? Listen, I don't know and if anyone else is going to agree with me on ringing the bell for Sony, but again, this goes right back to the games media. How in the freaking world, Fuzzy Belvedere, are they not asking what the is going on with PlayStation? Because, I mean, we're just podcasters. And for the last, 70-ish minutes, we have broken down what is broken at PlayStation, what's broken at Sony. And it's being ignored. It's being ignored by social media. That's not a surprise, but it's being ignored by games media. And it's bonkers that some of the games media in just recent days and weeks wrote about Xbox only being, good for Game Pass, or Xbox only being a good for third party, no hardware in the future. It has been an unbelievable laugh riot. I want to get your thoughts on this.
Yeah, I think the gaming media is afraid to speak bad of their preferred platform just for the fact that Sony is the type that will blacklist you. It's like, you don't give them a nice review, you might not get codes, the next title release. The other thing is, I know Sony and as well as Nintendo tend to get a little bit more of a grace period. Like when they have their rough spots, they're like, oh, well, they did greatness in the past, so it'll happen again. But then again, we see the same thought process go for Mass Effect, and we've seen how that's worked out with BioWare in comparison to some of their previous hits and things. So I think the big thing when it comes to Sony, me as a PlayStation 5 owner, I want to see either Gran Turismo 8 or put Gran Turismo 7 on PC, because even though the Pro exists, PC is still going to be the ultimate platform as far as for graphical fidelity, as well as mods and customization and things. But if they choose not to do that, I would like to see something like SOCOM. If they're having difficulty with games as a service, to me, SOCOM is kind of the easy, low-hanging fruit kind of thing. But even if you look at the ones that was on the list that Korkenstein mentioned, you have factions. Like, all right, so I don't know if people remember, there was a game that was kind of a scam called, I think, The Day Before. It looked like a little bit of The Last of Us meets The Division, and it was like the most wishlisted game in history, I think, on Steam for a bit. And because of that, if that team just looked at the fervor for that game, even though it didn't deliver, that studio didn't deliver or anything along those lines. I would say that was a perfect example of something that they could have done when it came to doing a game like Factions. So they had what would be a hit. Sure, it's not a guarantee, and sure they're better at well, Naughty Dog is better at like doing single player stories. But how hard would it be for them to spin up a team that's just focused on the support aspect for multiplayer? Like, keep your primary devs that are working on single player story narratives on that, and then build a team like after the bones are done for Factions, bring that other team in to continue doing the support, the updates, and so forth. And every so often have a meeting, with people like Drucker and stuff like that. So that way you could have I don't know, like an update to keep it within the same story vein that they would like to keep The Last of Us. The Spider-Man game was another one that seems like a no-brainer that should have been a hit for them. Like from a licensing standpoint, maybe the cost of licensing may not have been as lucrative, but we see how well Rivals is doing. And some people are like, well, Marvel Rivals is only doing well because of the IP. Well, that's part of it. If you have that type of a big IP to get your customer base or fan base in the door, that's at least the start of it. But then the other half is being able to support the game as well as continuously innovate on the game when it comes to what the player base may want or what they're willing to tolerate. Perfect example, if you look over at Overwatch, they pretty much had that mantle for a long time, and Marvel Rivals has kind of made them kind of look back within themselves and make some adjustments to be somewhat similar to Marvel Rivals. I mean, they always had the character design down pat, something that Concord kind of missed out on. But it just feels weird that Sony is having such a hard time, especially like I think Crispy had made mention earlier, like PlayStation tends to copy Xbox in many ways, whether it's the online services or trophies versus achievements and a whole list of other things. So with that being said, that should have been an example for them to look at what Xbox has been doing for decades now. Well, not decades, but they've been around for 20 years, but in
25 years next year. Yeah.
They always, like, even if they put something that's a dud, they work at it, much like even Ubisoft has done with like Rainbow Six. They will keep on working at it, listening to the community, making the adjustments and sticking behind it and seeing things through and watching it turn around. Like Sea of Thieves, it had its fan base right off rip. It kind of lulled a bit, something similar to the way Destiny did because of the content gap from its release up until like year one. And then after that, they've pretty much been on a rip, even doing partnerships with Disney for the Pirates of the Caribbean DLC and stuff like that. So there's a roadmap out there for Sony to follow, and it's right across the street over at Xbox, basically. And any other time they're looking over there, copying notes or copying the homework, they haven't copied quite the right formula for, their for Game Pass and for example's sake, but they still have their fan base that enjoys PS Plus, even though you're paying for a lot of the older content behind the highest paywall, and then you're not quite getting the upgrades of boosted frames or HDR or modern I guess remastering or reworking that you would see as a free upgrade within the walls of Xbox. And instead they do like a $10 upcharge for some of that stuff, but they haven't done it with their older titles. So it's just weird that Sony is not who we know them to be normally, like releasing 2 to 3 single player first party games that are great story driven narratives that are visually stunning, that are talk of or in the game of the year conversation. Like maybe Ghost of Yotai. Hopefully Ghost of Yotai will be that for them this year, but next year, is Fair Games even a thing? And to my understanding, I don't think Intergalactic is next year. I think that's a 2027.
That's been pushed into 2027. That's been confirmed. Yeah. And
then hopefully we get Wolverine next year. I mean, the PC exclusive that leaked out months ago. But no, in the grand scheme of things, I think Sony is like, either they thought that they could coast off of their name, which Xbox has done that from the 360 to the Xbox One to some extent. But now we're seeing that kind of same pattern with PlayStation from PS4 to PS5. Sure, they have hardware sales, and that's great. That's basically a piece of hardware in the living room, so that way you can sell more software. But if you're the box of the casual, like everybody's mentioned, you're the casual that's only buying maybe 2 titles a year, 3 if they're lucky, one being COD, the other one being either NBA 2K or being Madden or FC football or whatever kind of thing. They have to figure out something to kind of, I wouldn't say turn things around, but it does seem like they're heading down a path that doesn't look good long term. Like games as a service, they were all in until they weren't. It seems like every other week we hear of a cancellation or a delay or some sort of adjustment. Marathon is hopefully that going to be that spark of hope for them. I mean, Helldivers 2, great multiplayer game in the sense of co-op. I don't know why Sony is opposed to money. It would seem like if they did put that on Xbox, that would be an easy 1 million to 2 million sales that they would garner, that they're probably not going to garner any other way. I mean, it's what Xbox is doing. They were able to get more sales of Forza Horizon 5. It's a 4 or 5 year old game. Putting it over on that platform to sell 1 million right off the gate, if not more. I mean, that's I would say that's worth the porting costs. That's worth the effort. And now you've given the taste of those players over there that will be looking for Forza Horizon 6. Now, my game plan would be to keep that exclusive on the box, but that's not in the cards the way Xbox is moving at the current moment. But you do now have a fan base that was never probably willing or able to test your software or try that game, that are probably now going to be hooked for the next sequel. And that's something that Sony really needs to look at within their older catalog and start taking into consideration. Like there are so many titles, whether it's Spider-Man and considering licensing, I would say it's probably worthwhile, especially if they're trying to build up a budget for Spider-Man 3. Why not? I mean, I know it sounds cruel to say, hey, let the Xbox players help with that funding, but to some extent, the PlayStation players are kind of doing that for us, Forza Horizon fans. So I'm surprised they're not taking those same measures, but it is what it is. Hopefully they'll learn that, being on multiple platforms beyond PC is a lucrative venture for them to try. I mean, instead of trying games like, what was that, Horizon Lego? I mean, they probably should have waited until Switch 2 for something like that. But if you're going to experiment with a game, I would say something like Days Gone isn't a bad idea. Or when it comes to Horizon Forbidden West or Days or Zero Dawn or something along those lines. I mean, they should, at this point, if they can't get their first party to produce or churn out titles on a regular basis or a more consistent basis to what the PS4 era was used to, then they need to definitely change something before they find themselves with 1 to 2 games and that's about all that they're putting out in the year, or money having all these third parties while their first party studios are trying to crank out a story once every couple of years kind of thing. Something has to change, and I'm surprised the gaming media isn't calling it out, or even some of the loyal PlayStation fan base. It's like at this point, if they're more hyped for Xbox games coming over there, that should be all that we know, or all that we need to look at as far as how far behind or how desolate or dry of a spell they're having over at PlayStation at this point. But yeah, that's my 2 cents.
And it's great 2 cents, and it's a 2 cents that Sony needs, because they don't have any first party games to sell, so they'll take it. Look, at the end of the day, Sony is in a bit of a tailspin. I think that their fiscal conversation that they made public really does paint the picture. Is it dire? Is the studio dying? Are they closing up shops? No, they're the number 7th most recognized brand in the world. PlayStation sells consoles, but it's got to be more than that, and they know that. Again, I'm a numbers guy, so Helldivers 2, if you didn't know, cost between $50 and $100 million to make. Right? Okay, that's a lot of money, but that is relatively small. Interestingly enough, you had made mention of Spider-Man 2. Spider-Man 2 cost $315 million to develop. That is almost 3 times the amount. And guess what? Fun fact, Helldivers 2, as of November, sold 15 million copies across PS5 and PC. Now, mostly on PC, but PlayStation 5 gamers like myself stood up and bought the game. Spider-Man 2, I think it's like 10 million, something like that. So it got outsold. Spider-Man, the very expensive licensed IP that they have to give 35% of every sale to Marvel and Disney. For every copy they sell, whether it be in a bundle or not, 35% goes to Marvel. And Helldivers, from a small team, which, by the way, is no longer working with PlayStation. They've walked away. Their next game, they're paying for because they're going to want to put it everywhere. That is big trouble for Sony. The one success that they had, they effed up by not putting that game on Xbox, and it would have sold gangbusters. And I'm sure Arrowhead Studios tried their damnedest to get that game on Xbox. And the block hand, like Sony likes to do, came out and said, no dice. It's got to stay here because PlayStation exclusives matter. Well, you know what? Here's the numbers, folks. They don't lie.